They appear at night, knocking on your front door and tapping on your car window, asking to be let in. But there's something not quite right about these seemingly innocent children, as one couple discovered when they were out camping here in the UK. Because tonight we are exploring one of the most terrifying tales on the internet, because we will be discussing the black-eyed children, as I bring you one curious true story and 3 related very brilliant books. One night in the summer of 2021, a young couple were camping in a beautiful area here in the UK. They were just settling down for the night when they heard footsteps outside the tent. So they undid the zip and peeked outside to have a look, and what they saw terrified them so much they vowed never to go there again. But before we get into that, if you're a fan of curious true stories and you love a good book recommendation, then you are in the right place, because that's all we do, and I upload every single Sunday. So please click the like button if you enjoy this video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. And before we begin, I just want to make it clear that if you come across a child in need, of course you are going to help them. That is obvious, but these days the internet is a place where you have to state the obvious. So with that being said, let's get on with today's curious true story. In the summer of 2021, a young couple called Ben and Kylie decided to go camping in Cannock Chase, or the Chase as it's known locally. It's a 26 square mile area, beautiful countryside in the heart of the UK, just near Birmingham. It's heathland, there's rivers, there's lakes, there's beautiful forests. And whilst camping in the designated areas is legal, wild camping is not. And Ben and Kylie decided they were going to do some wild camping. They'd just gone through a pandemic, just gone through lockdowns, hadn't seen much of each other. So they thought, you know what, let's go out and have some fun. But they got a little bit more than they bargained for. They pitched their tent in Birches Forest, which is an area of Cannock Chase, and it got to about midnight and they were just settling down to sleep when they heard noises outside the tent. At first they thought it was a deer or some other kind of wild animal, so they stayed very still and very quiet because they didn't want to spook it. But then these noises became very distinctly the noise of footsteps. And Ben and Kylie did what I definitely wouldn't have done, and what people always do in horror movies. They unzipped the tent and stuck their heads outside. I think I would have stayed put personally, but there you go. And what they saw was absolutely terrifying. Now, both campers heard the distinctive sound of a small child giggling, and they turned on their torches and they lit up all the kind of dark woodland to try and find the source. And Ben saw this child first, running from tree to tree and hiding behind the trunks of the trees and kind of peeping out at them. Bear in mind it's midnight at this point. And it kept doing that before finally kind of stepping out right in front of them and staring at them. Kylie said, I was absolutely terrified. I'd read the stories about the black-eyed child in this area, but it wasn't until it stood there looking at me that I really started to believe it. Kylie said she knew instantly they were dealing with the real thing, because this child moved in a way that human beings cannot move. It kind of jumped and teleported from place to place. And it was moving around and hiding behind the trees. Ben said that he was shining the torch at this child when it came out and stood in front of them. And it just stood there staring at them and giggling. And the giggling started to get louder and louder. And it felt as though it was coming from the whole area of the wood, not from the child. And he said it was very, very disorientating. Ben said then she bent down for a moment as though she was tying her shoelace. And she stood up very suddenly, giggled, and then ran off back into the forest. Now, Ben and Kylie were absolutely terrified, as you can imagine. I mean, being confronted with this, I think anybody would have been absolutely terrified. And they went back to their tent and they stayed there, huddled together until the sun came up the following morning. I would have been out of there faster. I would have left skid marks in that forest, back to my car and away as far as I could. But they chose to stay in their tent and kind of sit it out until the sun came up and they felt safe. And even when the sun came up and they walked out of their tent, this child appeared again, and Ben shouted, "Just leave us alone," and they ran to their car and drove off. Now, this area of Cannock Chase, like many beautiful areas of natural beauty, which is what it's designated at, has got a history steeped in mysteries and folklore and legends, and there have been several sightings in Cannock Chase and around that area of this black-eyed child. But Cannock Chase also has its own terrifying true crime story, which some people believe is linked to the appearance of these children. So in 1965, Margaret Reynolds, a 6-year-old girl, vanished while she was walking to school in the Cannock Chase area. Now, all the locals pulled together and a search party was got up consisting of over 2,000 people. You know, police, army, volunteers, they all searched for her, but very sadly, she couldn't be found. Now, the very same year, another girl, a 5-year-old called Diane Tift, also went missing. She left home to go and visit her grandmother, but unfortunately she never arrived there, and this was also in the Cannock Chase area. Then on the 12th of January the following year, 1966, which was the same year Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were convicted following the discovery of their victims on Saddleworth Moor, the dead body of a girl was found by a member of the public in a ditch in Cannock Chase. Now, the police quickly arrived on the scene, and after they moved the body from the ditch, they made the shocking discovery that there were actually 2 girls in this burial site. So both girls were buried on top of each other, and Margaret Reynolds and Diane Tift were no longer thought of as missing, they were thought of as murder victims. It was August 1967 when a man approached a 7-year-old girl called Christine Darby. The man had pulled alongside Christine and persuaded her to get into his car, and there was another child who witnessed what happened, and this child told people afterwards of how they watched Christine enter the stranger's car. Christine was never seen alive again, and several days after her disappearance, Christine Darby's body was found approximately a mile away from the other 2 girls. Now, shortly after this, a local man witnessed a chap in a green and white Corsair attempting to abduct another girl from a similar area, all in the same area. Now, this horrified man shouted at the driver of the car, and the driver of the car fled, but luckily the man had the foresight to take down the car's registration number. The car belonged to a man named Raymond Morris, who was a local factory worker, and he was said by people who knew him to be a bit creepy, and allegedly he'd been seen taking photographs of schoolgirls kind of around the 1966 point, which is when all these girls went missing. Unfortunately, at the time, the police didn't have enough evidence to actually arrest him for anything, but they did eventually manage to arrest him in 1969 and send him to trial for the killing of Christine Darby. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough evidence to convict him for the murders of the other 2 girls, but they were pretty sure, the police, that he had killed all 3 girls. On the 18th of February 1969, a jury took only 2 hours to convict Morris of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison shortly afterwards. He repeatedly protested his innocence, but served 45 years in prison before he died on the 11th of March 2014. Now, for people who believe in ghosts and spirits, they think there is a definite connection between these tragic murders of these poor schoolgirls and the repeated appearance of the black-eyed children in the Cannock Chase area. But Cannock Chase is by no means the only place in the world where black-eyed children have appeared and been reported. And it all began in 1996 with a Texan journalist called Brian Bethel. Brian was sitting in his car one night in a deserted cinema car park doing a little bit of work when 2 children tapped on his car window and asked if he could take them to their mother's house to collect some money because they wanted to go and watch a movie. Now, Brian said these children were abnormally pale, like white pale, and they were very strangely still and measured, not like regular children at all. Their words were very polite, but they were oddly formal, and he said they were too old for their age. The things that they were saying, the way they said it, and the way they presented their request was very old-fashioned and not at all like a regular child would talk. Now he reported two things when he saw these children. The first thing was that he had this overwhelming sense of dread, like something really bad was about to happen, and this feeling came from nowhere and for no obvious reason, but it's something that a lot of people have reported when they've seen these black-eyed children, is they get this sudden sense of doom, a feeling that something terrible is on the horizon. And the second thing that Brian reported was that the children did not have regular eyes. There were no irises, no pupils. It was just a black void where the eye would be. And Brian very sensibly drove off in his car, left the car park and drove as far away as possible. But he wrote about his encounter, being a journalist, and the number of people that popped up who said, I have seen these children, I've had exactly the same experience. Maybe not the same two that you saw, but the black-eyed children, as they came to be known, knocked on my door one night just as I was going to bed and asked to come in. Or the black-eyed children tapped on my car window as I was parked up late at night. And all over the internet, and all over Reddit, of course Reddit, all of these black-eyed children's stories started coming through all over the country, all over America, and indeed worldwide. Now, out of all these stories and reports of black-eyed children, nobody let them into their house or into their car because they all got this sense of dread, this sense something awful would happen if they did. But there is one exception, because there's always one exception. And it's a couple in Vermont, an elderly couple, who during this really wild snowstorm with blizzards and gale force winds and snow and ice, heard a knock on their front door. And when they answered the front door, there were two young children standing there, inappropriately dressed, and they asked very politely of this couple if they could come inside and wait for their parents. Now this couple felt this unease, the same unease that Brian and everyone else had experienced. But they also felt they couldn't leave two children inadequately dressed out in a snowstorm, so they did actually invite them into the house. And they put blankets on them, made them a hot drink, and they were trying to talk to them. These children avoided all the questions that this elderly couple were putting to them and kind of just looked down all the time. But when they finally looked up and made eye contact, the elderly couple reported that these children, of course, did not have eyes. They just had this black void where an eye would usually be. And then all of a sudden, without warning, these two children both stood up at the same time and they said, our parents are here. And they walked to the front door, through the front door, up this snow-covered drive to a parked car which was waiting in the distance, and outside the car there were two men. Now the couple said afterwards that they thought, you know, it was an odd thing, but they kind of tried to explain it away as we do when something weird happens. And you think, well, maybe they got away with it, but they didn't get away with it. Afterwards, for a few days afterwards, they both had very unexplained, terrible illnesses. Both had awful, sudden, horrendous nosebleeds. Some of their animals died, some of their animals disappeared. And also they said that the house felt strange and odd. And so when they let the black-eyed children into their house, they'd also let something in with them as well. Now, before we look a little bit more at the black-eyed children and some of the theories around them, let's talk about three brilliant books, all dealing with children who are not quite as cute as your regular children. And the first book is Florence and Giles by the late and very much missed John Harding. This is set in 1891 in a remote and crumbling New England mansion. It is a Gothic novel to end all Gothic novels. If you love Gothic, you will adore this. It's narrated by 12-year-old orphan Florence, who is neglected by her guardian, her uncle, who doesn't really want anything to do with her and just lets her roam free in this Gothic crumbling mansion. And Florence's main aim in life is to look after her brother Giles, but her other aim in life is to read as many books as possible because her uncle, for some strange reason, has banned her from reading. Now, The children's first governess died a very violent and mysterious death, and a second governess, Miss Taylor, arrives at the crumbling mansion, and immediately strange phenomena begin to happen, and Florence is convinced that the new governess is a kind of vengeful, malevolent spirit who intends to do her brother harm. And as Florence is devoted to Giles, she decides she must overcome this powerful supernatural force in the shape of their new governess, take care of her brother and preserve the life she has come to love. I adored this book. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's one of the first Gothic novels I ever read. I thought I didn't like Gothic. What was I thinking? Did I even know myself? I adored it. It was brilliant. And if you love Gothic stories, you will love this too. It has a crumbly mansion. It has orphans. It has weird governesses. It has a governess that died in suspicious circumstances. It has everything. And it's also beautifully written. And the second book is The Fire Child by S.K. Tremaine. This is a story of Rachel, who is swept off her feet by a man called David. And they get together, and she not only moves away from London with David to start this whole new brilliant life in Cornwall, she also inherits David's son, Jamie. 8 years old, and on the surface seems very cute. But little does Rachel know this is not going to be a cute situation, because David's first wife, Jamie's mother, died very suddenly, and Jamie believes that he can hear his mother, and he is in touch with the ghost of his mother, and this Cornish house that they are living in is haunted by his mother. And on top of that, Rachel brings along a lot of baggage of her own, and all in all, it's a bit of a chaotic life that they begin to lead in this seemingly idyllic place. S.K. Tremaine is just so good at writing spooky children. They also wrote The Ice Twins, which I could easily have spoken about today. And when I read The Ice Twins, I was so terrified. Halfway through, I made my dog go with me to the washing line to hang the washing out, because I was convinced that these two twin girls, these creepy kids, were going to be waiting by the washing line for me. So S.K. Tremaine is brilliant, and if you like a good thriller and you like a good twisty turny tale, then I can highly recommend both this and The Ice Twins. And finally, The Midwich Cuckoos by the brilliant John Wyndham, who is perhaps best known for the brilliant Day of the Triffids, which is a science fiction, and this is also science fiction. It's set in the sleepy village of Midwich, which I believe is supposed to be in Wiltshire in the UK, where a mysterious object, a silver object, appears, and all of the inhabitants of the village fall unconscious. The next day, the object disappears, everybody wakes up, and you think, no harm done. Except there was harm done, because every woman in the village suddenly discovers all at the same time that they are pregnant, and the resulting children do not belong to their parents. They are all very, very blonde, very, very golden-eyed, and have this frightening ability to manipulate all around them. And this brings them into conflict with the villagers, just as the chilling realisation dawns upon them of what exactly is going on. Excellent book. The original film I thought was brilliant. You may have seen it. If not, then do read the book. And even if you have seen the film, the book is always worth a read. It's an absolute classic, and I highly recommend it. So let us return and travel north from sleepy Wiltshire and go back to Cannock and talk about these black-eyed children. Now, usually at this point in the video, I'll talk about theories on why things happened, or explanations and possible ideas of what the truth might be. But with the black-eyed children, both the Cannock Chase children and the worldwide black-eyed kids community, just involves people arguing as to whether these children are vampires or ghosts, or indeed aliens, because aliens, as we know, come into everything. And every time I hear about extraterrestrials, I always think of this, the incredible Al Bundy, and a brilliant and very memorable episode of Married with Children. So I'm not going to talk about whether they are vampires, ghosts, or extraterrestrials, but what I'd love to talk about is why we are so terrified of the black-eyed children, and why there were so many people saying, yes, I've met them, yes, they knocked on my front door, I've seen them. Why we were so kind of attracted to this particular internet legend. And there are one or two reasons psychologically why the black-eyed children captured our imagination. Now, the first thing to point out is the obvious: they are children. And the fact that it takes the form of children is especially disturbing, because it takes something which epitomises usually joy and innocence and turns it on its head. And we have this kind of drive, innate drive, to protect children. So when we're faced with evil in the form of a child, it triggers all sorts of confusion in our primitive kind of lizard brains that we should be protecting children, but then again these children are evil and should not be protected, and our brains cannot deal with those two simultaneous pieces of information. And secondly, in a similar vein, they are human, but they are not human. And that is something that our primitive brains also struggle with. They struggle with something which is seemingly in human form, i.e. familiar to us, but isn't actually human, so not familiar. So these children look like humans, but they are clearly not humans, because they have this weird eye thing going on, and they have this sense of doom that they bring with them. So looking like kids and not being kids is also something our logical brains can't deal with. And I can completely relate to that, because I have real issues with humans with animal heads, like this, and also this. And I think it's called theriocephaly in art, or maybe in science as well, but definitely in art. And I can't bear it, so I can completely understand. I don't know why it freaks me out so much, it just freaks me out. So I can completely understand the human not human thing that triggers our brain into a sense of panic. And thirdly, it's all in the eyes. The windows to the soul, as they say, and they really are, because we rely on information from the eyes to tell us a lot of things. You know, what people say is important, but how they look in their eyes tells the real story. So it's a good indication of trustworthiness, of honesty, of intention. And human beings rely a lot on information they get from the other person's eyes. So when you take away that information with these children who have black eyes and no information is coming from their eyes, then we find that very uncomfortable, because our brains aren't getting the usual sources of knowledge that we're used to. And lastly, it's these creatures are so polite. They are maybe potentially malevolent forces, but they have incredibly good manners. They ask to come in. They don't break in or trespass or overpower us with their ghostly abilities. They ask permission, and it's that asking permission which travels through a lot of folklore and a lot of stories about kind of vampires, ghosts, devils, demons. They can't enter into a room or a premises or a house without first getting permission from the person who lives there. And that mythology that the black-eyed children's stories borrow from, this asking if they can come in, is something that triggers a template in our minds from fairy tales and scary stories we've heard since we were little. So whether these stories are ghost stories, or whether they're spirits from the past, or whether they're aliens from the future, they all have this one thing in common. They don't force themselves into your home. They don't overpower you or knock down walls or ceilings or do anything very dramatic at all. They just ask you very, very nicely if they can come in. And that might be the most frightening thing of all. I hope you've enjoyed today's curious true story and these absolutely brilliant books, all involving not so cute children. If you like the video, please click on the like button. It only takes a second and it means the world to me and Lewis. And do hit the subscribe button too and the notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Next week, I'll be bringing you a curious true story about one of the most mysterious ocean voyages in history, and 3 absolutely brilliant books all dealing with the idea of boats. I will see you then, and in the meantime, have a brilliant week.